Before the next episode of X Job Downloaded starts, I have a big favour to ask. If you've enjoyed any of our episodes so far, please can you click on the follow button on your platform. I'm on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon and YouTube. It costs nothing to follow, but makes a real difference to me as a podcast producer. Thank you. This interview is being tape recorded. My name is Paul Maleary and this is X Job Downloaded. And today I'm going to interview Monique Rollin. Now, Monique is a former member of the police department and now she works in industry doing consulting for companies and other organisations. But where did it all begin for you, Monique? What was life all about?
I think it began in the panic towards looming retirement is where it began. Because you don't start work, full-time meaningful work, most of us, or at least I did, in my late teens. And so in my early mid-50s, the idea of that coming to a halt was really overwhelming. And when I decided to retire, and there were a lot of circumstances around it in policing, and those in this industry know that's not always... Sometimes it catches you by surprise, or sometimes it's, the series of events. And so I didn't really have a plan, and I had to think of one pretty quickly.
Right. Come
up with something. And I knew that I didn't want to walk into another organization where I had to fight for a seat at the table. So I wanted to do something independent. I just didn't know exactly what.
So where were you born?
My father is French Canadian. My mother has a we are quintessentially Canadian by many, many generations. I live in a small city called Sault Ste. Marie, which is in the center of the Great Lakes on the US border. I was born and raised here, and I got into policing here. And I was a police officer with my own municipal service for 32 years. And
how was that then? So, and what was the inspiration for you to join the police department in the town that you lived in?
Well, there wasn't much inspiration. I had unlike a lot of my colleagues, I didn't aspire to be a police officer. I was actually a paramedic at the time. And this is, mid 80s. And because that was a fairly new profession, a lot of, I was kind of overqualified for the work I was doing. And there was a lot of contract work. So I've always had a second job, always had a gig on the side. And I got a contract teaching CPR and first aid to the police department.
Wow.
And I was working on the local ambulance service. I was driving 3 hours to the next city. That's what it's like here, to work on the helicopter. And they were saying, you should apply here. We're hiring 10 people this year, and it would be a really great job. And I thought, I just started this career. I don't want to be a cop. And my father, who is a 30-year steelworker, at one point said, the pension is much better. You should think about being a police officer. As I was 21 years old, I didn't know what I wanted for breakfast, much less what I wanted for the next 30 years. But as I started working closer around first responders with the police, I thought, this is worth a shot.
Fantastic.
Which is unlike the other recruits who, were really knew what they wanted. And so I applied and was on the job within 3 months. And I never looked back, although I still continued to be a paramedic on my days off. So I did work 2 jobs.
Wow.
For about 5 years. Yeah.
So you're on the Great Lakes. So am I going towards London and Detroit and that?
Straight north. Of Detroit.
Straight north.
So where the 3 big Great Lakes join, and you can spot that on any map.
Yep.
That's where I am. Yeah, that's where I am.
Beautiful. I'm very interested in politics and especially around policing. And of course, you've got Detroit, which is just across the water, if you like, which has a horrendous record when it comes to homicides.
Yes.
But that's not replicated just across the borders.
No, not at all. And I can see the United States from my downtown of my city. So I live on the US border.
Right.
It is a 10-minute drive. It is nothing politically, criminality, even our culture, even though we look the same, we sound a little bit the same, our culture is quite different.
Yeah, absolutely. And you don't have guns in Canada readily?
That's the difference. So you cannot own a gun for personal protection in Canada. And we're very much like the UK with our gun laws.
Yes.
And so that is a significant contributing factor to a lot of our gun crime. That said, it's obviously on the rise, and you can get guns, and we have the largest unprotected border in the world. So they're becoming more and more readily available. But we know that going into every home, someone doesn't have a handgun in their hand. That's changed. I mean, there are lots of long guns, and, we do have a outdoorsy culture, but if you're into a metropolitan city, we're just not facing the same risk.
And I suppose if you arrive at a scene and somebody's got a gun in their hand, which isn't a long gun that's been used for hunting rifle or anything like that, then they automatically become a suspect because they're illegally holding a gun on the highway.
Oh yeah, we have pretty strict laws even for storage, and you can't store a long gun with ammunition. So we have relatively strict gun laws in comparison to others, particularly the US.
Yeah.
And so I think that you see the impact, with our crime statistics for sure.
When you joined the police, how many women were in the police department that you went to?
Very few. Very few. There were no women leaders. In fact, I was promoted to inspector. So we have limited ranks because of our size. So that would be a division commander level. And I was the first woman in senior command in 150 years of history in that service. And so there weren't many women. I'm going to say probably around 10% at the time. Certainly no women leaders for many, many years. And those women leaders never really made it past sort of that mid-level sergeant manager. And so really no examples of female leadership.
And what year did you join?
1987.
Yeah, so I did as well. And I was 21. So, and the world was completely different then, wasn't it? I mean, it was
yes,
the culture and everything else, and I call it the MTV culture, but sort of has taken over the world, certainly in the UK. But what was that like? Because you're going into a police service where you've probably got people that joined the service in the early 60s.
Yes.
What was that like as a young female going into what would have been then a male-dominated environment?
In retrospect, at the time, I really didn't know any different. But in retrospect, I can't believe the behaviors that I was subjected to in comparison to now. And also, I was a 21-year-old kid. So out there telling people what to do and trying to solve the world's problems, which is ridiculous when you think about it. But, traditionally, the youngest officers were paired with the oldest officers, the most senior. I know we had coach officers, but I'm sitting in a cruiser in the middle of the night with, a fella who's in his almost 60, who's been we have nothing in common.
No.
And the behaviors, the attitude. I had an officer said, "You're wasting my time. I don't know why I'm working with a woman. What good are you ever going to be to me?" Just that kind of attitude. And it really forms your whole career, because that messaging, you're not good enough, you have to work harder, you don't belong, that might not be that overt as it was maybe in 1987, but that messaging, and I'm not alone in my opinion, I have a lot of senior female colleagues, but that messaging carries along your whole career.
I absolutely agree. And I think it's more, I was 21, and I tell this story. I remember going round to this guy's house, and he'd had a domestic argument with his wife. And there I am trying to tell him how to run his life. And a serious girlfriend was somebody that I've been with for about 3 weeks. That was as good as it got. And
what did we know? And we wanted to help people, and to be so shocked when they weren't receptive. Like, we didn't know anything.
Who knew? I mean, it was bonkers, really. But it was a great grounding, because it formed we are the people we are now because of what we did in the police service.
Of course.
And I think my views are more polarised because I now have a granddaughter, and I believed in fairness anyway. I was always one, but I'm now at a point where I think, do you know what? She can do anything that she wants to do because she can. She should have opportunity, and I believe that people should have opportunity. And I think you do earn respect, and if you do work hard and people value you aspire to be, the governor, the boss of the station, and that's absolutely right. But what types of crimes would be dealt with within your police department?
Everything, and I've worked everything from drugs to major crimes, homicide, child abuse, everything. So we're a municipal police service, but because we're geographically isolated. I mean, this is Canada. The next city is 3.5 hours one way and 8 hours the next.
Wow.
So, well, that is the geography. So we become, although there is provincial police in Canada, and they police a lot of the rural areas, and they support municipal police services when our resources tend to get overwhelmed. We had 5 homicides in 5 weeks when I was working in investigations. We just didn't have any more bodies. So to front load those types of major crimes, and some of the equipment and extra forensics would be Ontario Provincial Police would assist us. But no, you're an independent, you're a city, you are everything. And we wear a lot of hats. Although I was in investigations for many years, I was a crisis negotiator for over 20, working with tactical and those types of calls. And you had to be very flexible in your skill set. So no, we geographically, where I live, don't have the neighbors to rely on.
Well, the cavalry aren't just around the corner. What about the RCMP? Do they have people attached to you or nearby?
RCMP doesn't do municipal policing in Ontario.
Right.
So RCMP supplies municipal policing or supportive policing outside of this province. However, there is a detachment in my city. They focused more on border crimes and some of the other federal crimes. But no, they weren't a supportive uniform branch that assisted at all.
Wow. And what about train? I mean, I'm fascinated the fact that you're so far. If you're 8 hours from one city and 3.5 hours from the other, what about the infrastructure around training as a police officer training? How does that work?
Well, in Ontario, which is the biggest province, so we have 12 million people or something along that line. We have one police college in this province, so most of the provinces are provincial. Some of the smaller, less populated provinces, not so much. So in Ontario, the Ontario Police College meets the standard for training. So every recruit goes to the Ontario Police College for their recruit program, and then they consistently run senior courses nonstop. So even though I am an 8-hour drive from the police college, if I'm a forensic investigator, then I would take my course there, 5 weeks, or a fraud course or a warrant course or some homicide or some of those senior level training is most of it's offered through the Ontario Police College. There is some training through the Canadian Police College, which is run by the RCMP in Ottawa. So there's programs, those seats are limited because they're for the whole country. But yes, there is regular training, and the new Police Act that's coming in this year actually stipulates what training has to be supplied by the police college.
That's interesting. And how has the tilt towards diversity impacted on policing in Canada? Because when we joined in 87, diversity was a word that people could only just about spell.
I was diversity.
Yeah, I suppose you were then. Yeah. But is there a bigger leaning towards it?
Really, yes. And it is very much the buzzword. And I know police services across the country are really struggling with recruiting. It is less palatable to become a police officer now. I'm seeing it everywhere. The recruiting, I think in policing recognize that we need to represent the communities that we police. And our communities are vastly diverse. So we are doing a disservice to our community by not representing them within our own ranks.
Yeah.
And we know if you're a good leader, you need to have various lenses at your table. So I cannot see my decisions through your eyes or somebody else's eyes and the impact on their culture or community. And how ignorant would I be to not allow my viewpoint to be questioned? So it's not just equality, it's diversity of lens, it's the ability for those cultures to have a voice at the table. It's bringing people onto the police service that represent their community. We are still not there.
No, I don't think we are. I think sometimes, and I'll go very candid, I think sometimes there is in this country, we sometimes, and I've got friends from all walks of life, but sometimes we will sacrifice quality in order to get, police officers feel that, or senior management feel that they need to tick a box. So they rush people through. When there are people out there, we just need to get the right person to do the role, because they are representative of the community. Absolutely right. But there needs to be an ability to carry out the investigation, or, be the right person for the role, because policing isn't for everybody. It sounds nice. It sounds great, but policing is not for everyone.
No, and if we knew, I don't think we knew 30 years ago that majority of people don't make it out of this profession unbroken.
No.
In some way. And that was never, ever, ever talked about until recently. And I don't think that we are transparent enough with the damage that it does to people.
Yeah, and I think the damage is often ignored, certainly from the top level. That they'll pay lip service to we'll have the broken blue light thing or whatever they're doing this month. But that just grabs social media headlines because they feel that there's a need to do it. But whether they actually buy into it, I'm not sure. Because if we did, we wouldn't have as many officers that are suffering with PTSD. We wouldn't have so many people that have gone through broken marriages, alcoholism, all the stuff that happens. It's the detritus of life, but the support isn't there.
I think it's very impactful if you look at the numbers and the people that are off work, and I'm not sure what it's like in the UK, but we're looking at workplace insurance, and financially, take out the people. Financially, it's costing these organizations.
Yeah. So
not just that compassionate, empathetic, helping our folks. It still is a business at the end of the day, and you can't run it.
It is, and I think what's lost is if you have one person go from a team of 8, then you're 12.5% down, and somebody has to pick up that workload. Then it applies more pressure onto the next person, and all of a sudden you're down to 50% workload. And
they're not replaced. We know that.
No, they're not. They're not replaced. And finances here around policing is pretty poor. I don't know what it's like in Canada, but the greatest amount of money spent on policing is the wage, and I understand that. Yes. But people have to live. So, where do they want these cops to reside if they're not going to pay them a decent wage? And if they're not going to pay them a decent wage, then they're not going to join. I live 50 miles from the centre of London. If a kid wants to go and work in the financial district, they can earn themselves £100,000 a year, fairly easy without breaking into a sweat. I mean, they'll be lucky to get half of that when they first join the police service. And it's a no-brainer. We can't get... So what happens, we get some very willing volunteers that want to take part, want to join, but they're not always up to the quality that's required. Standards matter.
There's been much talk, at least in Canada, about professionalism and professionalizing the profession. And so there's talk about degree programs, there's talk about education, consistent standardized training across the country, which it really is because we have one criminal code.
Yeah.
But if you are going to professionalize the profession, then you also have to pay for that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It can be very attractive, of course, but we are paid a good wage in Canada.
Yeah.
Unlike our colleagues, even in the US, which is across the board.
But you see, if you go back in history, when there is a wage crisis, you will see an increase in some form of corruption. I think it's naive to believe that there's not going to be ramifications for poor funding.
I think you pay for what you get.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get what you pay for.
Yeah, absolutely. So when did you retire?
I retired 5 years ago.
And up until that point, were you still an active, albeit you'd been promoted to inspector and you're a divisional district commander, were you still an active police officer, or had you become more strategic and more desk-bound?
More desk-bound, but when I was running the patrol division, I was an incident commander. And so I was out with the tactical team all the time on their calls. I made it a point of training with them every week if I could, or every couple of weeks, to wear that uniform and be on the front, to be deployed with them, because you need to come from a place of credibility and you need to come from a place of the same training. I needed to have the same skill set as they did, or at least understand what it is that I was approving. Ultimately, as an incident commander, the chips fall where they may, but you hold all of that level of responsibility for every single person deployed. And if you don't have that skill set, then you're certainly putting them at risk and doing a disservice to everyone. So yes, the answer is as much as I could to stay involved. Our service is not big enough that you could be in a corner office and not be involved. And so even in investigations, working with a major case manager and being involved in every major case, every homicide, making sure that they're at your elbow. So as much as I could, yes.
I mean, it's interesting because, as you say, when you haven't got the neighbours to call on to get the additional support, you've got to do everything, haven't you? If you got a homicide that would come in, and I mean, I'm particularly interested in this aspect. Did you have a dedicated team that just worked on homicides, or was that dealt with by all the?
No, our detectives were all cross-trained. So everyone was a major crimes investigator, sexual violence, sexual assault investigator. We had very few specialized units. Of course, we had intel, drugs, things like biker enforcement, intelligence, separate unit. At the time I was there, break, enter, and robbery, fraud, or financial crimes. But we would front load everyone into a homicide. Everyone was major case trained.
And did you use?
It's efficient.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's more efficient. I was on a major crime team, major investigations for 8 years, and I had much fun. But what it actually did, it de-skilled the officers that were on the division. I mean,
correct.
We're a very small county geographically, although we've got the longest coastline in the UK because of all the creeks and what have you. There's 1.9 million people live in our county, and we go on to the borders with London and so on and so forth. So when I was the temporary DCI, Detective Chief Inspector, I had 90 detectives plus civilian staff, and none of those would work on a homicide. None of them. Because we had a dedicated team, because they didn't
What happens when you have 5 homicides?
Well, we had quite a few teams, but the thing is that we all need to deal with the sexy side of life sometimes. We need to have that to understand what we want out of policing. I always wanted to work on murders, and that's what I did, fortunately. So if you don't have a dedicated team and you have a homicide where the suspect isn't known, how does that work within the detective's role?
They assign a major case manager and a lead investigator, and then build your team.
Right.
from the available detectives.
Right. Okay. And do you have family liaison officers?
Yes.
You do?
Warrant writers, family liaison. So we follow the major case model. So those positions would be filled.
Right.
So your major case manager, your lead investigator, family liaison, warrant writers, your field officers, all of those positions get filled.
Right. Okay. And how long would they stay on that investigation?
Till it's done.
Till it's done. Wow. Yeah, because I mean, I worked on some that are still going.
Me too.
You know,
Me too.
They put them to bed slightly, but they'll always have somebody that will run along. You know, pick up any inquiries that come in.
Yes.
And do they run the investigation by way of computers? We have Holmes here.
Oh yes.
So everything goes.
So they use major case software.
Right. Yeah, because years ago we used the Cardex system when I first joined the police, and they had a big rotary of cards, and you'd write the nominals' names in there and what the action was, and you'd raise the action, and the statement would be taken, and the statement reader would read, and they still do it, but it goes through the Holmes system. But I think it's absolutely fascinating because I think policing is a common language. It's an internet. Yes. If I could speak Urdu, I could phone somebody up and ask them the same questions because they'll be doing a similar thing.
Absolutely. And I think we have that. I think there was a T-shirt that I had one time that said "Cops, biggest street gang in the world." Probably not appropriate anymore.
Well,
but really, we are that one profession that is relatable internationally, no matter where you are. If you walked up to a police car anywhere in the world and asked if you could take a picture and show them your badge and said you're a police officer, they wouldn't. You have instant camaraderie.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we don't get to keep our badge. Do you get to keep your badges when you retire?
We get yes, and our warrant card says retired.
See, we do not get a retired warrant card. You can't make that up. Honestly, I was absolutely crestfallen when I had to give my badge back.
I don't use it. You don't have no use for it.
No.
I have it. And I have some of, we hold on to some of those mementos you can see over my shoulders.
Yeah, I've still got some of mine. I mean, I'm clearing out the closet, and my wife has told me to make sure that, I get rid of everything that I've got to get rid of. But it's hard, and I've got my police hats up there, and in fact, my granddaughter was running around in one of them earlier on. But it doesn't matter where you go in the world. Like you say, if you go to New York and you say, I'm a cop, I was a cop, former cop, it's an instant, how are you doing? And what are things like in London? And that's how it is. Do you feel that you achieved everything you wanted to achieve over your time in the police service? Absolutely not.
Absolutely not. There was a series of circumstances that led, around my retirement and promotion that I just felt like I had more to contribute, but that wasn't the place or the time. So, and I was young. So I went into, consulting training. I trained police officers all over the country, actually all over the world, essentially, and first responders now. And so I still am in the policing world. And volunteering. And so I really enjoy that. So I've come to realize that is no longer a regret. It's probably a good thing. But yeah, at the time I didn't want to retire.
And could you have stayed on, or is there an optimum age for pension and
No, I could have stayed. Yeah, I could have stayed.
Yeah, that's tough. I mean, I do, but I quite like the idea that if I want to have tomorrow off to go and play golf.
Yes.
And we're still young enough to appreciate what we've got in front of us, because I don't know what it's like there, but historically here, we'd have police officers retire on a Friday and they'd keel over on a Monday because they were
very, very common,
totally burnt out. And I think that there's a better work-life balance now. And
we don't live long in this profession.
No, No, sadly.
I enjoy taking my summer off because it's Canada, so we enjoy our summers. And I have a cottage on the water on Lake Huron, and I don't schedule travel or training. Occasionally, maybe one off for clients who do something in the summer. It's very unusual. We know policing shuts down most training in the summer. That's when everybody's on vacation, so they're just trying to fill shifts. And first responders, so I would never have that luxury working full-time or for someone else.
No, absolutely. So you have your own business now. You have your own company. Talk me through that. How does that now work?
So what's interesting is when I started in the training world with another colleague, training crisis negotiators and incident commanders. And it was comfortable. And I thought, there were so many other niches that could be developed. And a lot of what we do as negotiators is transferable to anyone. So started working in the crisis de-escalation intervention techniques world, working with first responders, mobile mental health officers that are deploying with, and kept seeing that, starting to realize that I had some transferable skills to areas outside of policing. I left that association, and I once had a kind of a leadership coach say to me, "You need to focus on just one thing." That would have been the worst advice had I taken it, because now I'm working with Office of the Fire Marshal and fire investigators and mobile mental health professionals, and I do emergency management training. In a small city, wanted some do a lot of scribe training based on incident command scribe training. It just isn't out there. And so if somebody says to me, do you think we could develop something based around this? My answer is always yes. Enjoy the challenge, transfer those skill sets, fill those small niches that people are asking for, and it becomes successful.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I'm happy to try. I've done lots of policy work, research and development, national models, and a small service needed their 911 program tweaked to train their operators. So why limit yourself if you enjoy that kind of challenge, which I do?
No, I absolutely
agree. Give me something to figure out.
But also the skills that you're describing, if you go into any industry, because the way that the world is at the moment, critical incident management could be in any office block in Canada, in the UK. If you yes. God forbid, if you had an active shooter walk into a mall, what you want the manager and the security team to understand what they need to do in order to deal with that crisis, how they deal with somebody who's been killed in the workplace, and manage the all the staff and all those types of things. And what you're describing is what happens in a workplace every day, but they don't know how to do it.
And even things like, if you're going to stand up, you have a very robust emergency management plan, and you're going to stand up an emergency operations center of some sort, how are you managing all of that information? And when you start asking those questions, we start to find all those niches. And so it's not difficult for us. We are problem solvers by profession. That's all we've done for 30, 35 years, to solve problems and figure it out. And I'm perfectly comfortable. Plunk me into something and I'll figure it out, and I'll help you, and I will listen to you. And maybe that's where it's become successful is, and I will learn all about you and your profession and what your needs are. And I will talk to everyone that this will impact, because we don't do that well in policing when we talk about operational planning, and then come together with a solution that fits everyone. And it doesn't have to be huge. No. And the training should resonate with every single person that's in the room. And if it doesn't, I'm not doing a good job. So it has to be contextualized. And that's how this training and some of the things I've developed have been successful, because if I'm sitting in a classroom and I'm leaning back thinking this doesn't apply to me, or this is canned, this course feels canned, I don't buy in. No. And it doesn't resonate. So what I do and what I try to do is contextualize it for the learner and speak to their experience. And I think, and then I always get asked back. So, and the reason that is because the feedback is good and the learners are seeing some value.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you can relate to what they're going through, having that instruction, because you've been there.
And that's the training I wanted.
Yeah.
Right. And I remember some of the best training I had because people learn from stories and they learn from involvement. I remember the worst training I've had and the best.
Yeah, and we're good at telling stories, aren't we?
We have stories no one would believe.
Well, no, exactly. People. I always say is people pay money to do what we've done. What was the most difficult part of your police career?
Probably some of the. It was more internal than it was external. It wasn't dealing with the public and the calls and some of the traumatic events that we are faced with. It wasn't that. It was dealing with the internal
skullduggery
behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you know what? That is also an international language, because when you get to that, when you get promoted, there is always a level of jealousy where people will go out of their way to try and scupper the remainder of your career. My last 6 months were the most torturous part of my police service.
I can't agree more. And this is consistent with so many people who would think that they would suffer more at the hands of their colleagues than they would dealing with what we see.
I know. Criminals were treating us better. And it's quite shameful. And some of these people, I don't know about your particular thing, but some of the people that I was involved in have gone on to be pretty high up in international policing and senior managers within metropolitan forces, and their behaviour is absolutely shameful.
And that's the right word to use.
What does the future look like for Monique? How are you going to progress your business? You're now flying solo, doing your stuff. Do you bring other people in? How's it going to work?
Well, I don't. I have a group of associates, my cast of characters, or my friends actually, who all are experts in their own space, and we're all friends. Well, they're all friends of mine who are very like-minded to say, this came across my desk, this would be good for you. Or there's part of, I have no ego to say that I can do this part of what I'm being asked for, but I know a guy or a girl. I've got somebody.
Yep.
And so, and part of it too is bringing them in if they're leaving policing or their own profession to build their audience. And so I work with these folks who are phenomenal in everything that they do, build maybe their own business or work together when we need to. I like to think that I should retire again. I don't have that in me. So I'm always growing my business or learning new things or expanding. A lot of conference speaking recently has come up, which I enjoy. And no one will ever tell you that I'm not the one who's quiet or can shut up. So I'm enjoying that. Some curriculum development in emergency management, touching that a bit. So I'm enjoying the opportunity to expand, but I don't want to have employees or this global presence, or I just want to be good at what I do and help those folks who want to do the same as me. I've become very involved with a group that is assisting police in Ukraine, particularly women in policing in Ukraine who have no equipment.
Right.
So that's a recent venture with an amazing group of officers who have been funding themselves to go to the Ukraine with 5,000 pairs of boots and water purification systems and body armor, and been working with this group on a new initiative to outfit female officers with female body armor.
Fantastic.
Yes. So it's very fulfilling to be able to have the luxury of time to volunteer. I've worked with our women's shelter in my city for 15 years. So that is, I wouldn't be able to do those things if I didn't have this amazing network of colleagues and customers and relationships. So yeah, I'm very lucky.
I really believe that giving back and doing the right thing but I think that's brilliant. And if there's anybody within those schemes, I go out to 90 countries now. So if there's anybody that you think would be worthy of speaking to, that good at talking, like yourself, and you want to get a message out there, then please point them in my direction.
Well, we know police support police, and in a conversation with a retired inspector with the rail police, he was telling me what he had done and what this group had done, and they've been on a few missions. And he said, I said, what is your biggest need? And he said, female body armor. And I said, wait a minute, I'm on the board with Ontario Women in Law Enforcement. I know all of the leaders in Saskatchewan Women in Law Enforcement, Atlantic and British Columbia, the different provinces, International Association of Women Police. Can I help? And we put a plan together to get 50 vests. He has a colleague who is running a police academy. They are seeing more and more female recruits because more male members are on the front line, but they're still having to police their country.
Yeah.
And they don't have any body armor. The academy leader is a woman. We've been connected. We set a goal for 50. We have had over 240 just by me reaching out to my colleagues and things like LinkedIn and just my own connections. And so that power of police supporting police, but they don't have, I know we are supporting our frontline there, but in policing, they are, this woman said, we feel like we've been forgotten. So you have a big reach in policing. Certainly, I will get you in touch with the leader of this organization.
Please do. There must be somebody that's got body armor kicking around that can help.
Anything. They need boots and socks and winter gear and everything. And so it's been very fulfilling, and it's a privilege to be retired, to be able to set my own schedule, work with amazing first responders all over the world, and still be able to leverage those relationships to support police in the Ukraine. Yeah, it's a pretty good day.
Fantastic. Now, my next question is, why are you in Canada today? Because if it's -2, why haven't you followed all the other snowbirds down to Florida?
Because it's Florida. And you should look at the exchange rate for the Canadian dollar. But
is it bad?
It is. Yeah, it's bad. And this is where we live. And this is actually -2 is a beautiful day. So
yeah, no, absolutely.
It's our culture, and we enjoy it. Although as much as I love where I live, this profession, my consulting business, has brought me all over the world, and I couldn't be happier. And I've seen places in Canada that I've just dreamed about seeing. And so that's another great advantage to being your own boss.
It's beautiful. What countries have you operated in, or do you operate in?
Canada mostly, in Switzerland a little bit, and US.
Okay.
And it's had some interest in the UK. We're very similar in our training.
Yeah.
Very, very similar, the UK. So I've had some interest. I'm mostly one person, and my schedule is very busy. So, and the opportunity, I've done some web stuff. It's not the same as traveling.
No,
spent some time in the UK a year ago and absolutely loved it.
Where did you go to?
Just London. But it was a beautiful, amazing trip. I think the training in policing and first responders in the UK is very similar to us. And we're very focused now on trauma-informed response, which I'm doing a lot of work with. Even things like the victim-offender overlap, when we're talking with how we behave towards people, crisis de-escalation. It is much more acceptable as a way of policing in the UK and Canada than it is for other countries.
Yeah. What are the standards like of the police officer, and their standards of dress? And is there an expected code of what they wear and how they have their hair?
Yes. So there is, there is a code of conduct, and there's our uniforms, policies. Yes, every service, and our uniforms are not that different across the country. And deportment, I mean, I suppose it's how well it's enforced, but it's certainly falls under our procedures. For sure.
You're only as strong as your weakest leader, aren't you? Because if somebody accepts certain standards,
what do they say? Never pass a fault.
Well, exactly, because you're just leaving it for somebody else to pick up. And from my perspective, if they just dealt with it at the time, it would reduce the amount of rubbish complaints that I would get across my desk, where somebody has just walked past a car that's parked on a pedestrian crossing by a school, when all they had to do is just tell that driver to move. And then I get a complaint to deal with. And you just think, oh, my life, why don't they just get it? But anyway, but we're all fallible, aren't we? We all do things that not everybody likes. What is the percentage of Indigenous population within the police service now, and has that changed over the years?
It's unfortunately way too low. Way too low. And I think one of my biggest criticisms when it comes to policing is we're doing very little, very late, and it is often a knee-jerk response to things like our Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and starting to understand generational trauma in our country. And so, and the relationship with our First Nations and our Indigenous peoples is not good. And very few want to become police officers. There are Indigenous police services. So there are First Nations services. They have their own police services for their own First Nations, which is really important. But I don't think we do a good job.
Do you think that the lack of recruitment within the police service is because there is a lack of trust within the police, or a lack of trust within the communities with the people that join from their communities?
Of course. I can't speak for Indigenous folks, but of course, generationally, there's not been a good relationship with policing. So there is no other assumption to make other than that relationship is going to impact recruiting.
No, absolutely. Thank you so much for taking part in this today. But before we conclude this interview, I've just got to ask you one thing. Is there anything you'd like to add, alter, or correct in relation to the statement that you've made today?
No, I just encourage officers who are leaving policing to really find their path, and don't assume that all they can do is what they've ever done, because we have a unique skill set that can translate to so many things. And so don't think that policing or security or that type of work is really all that's out there for you. Explore and find your path. You'll be amazed at how fulfilling it is.
Wise words.
Really.
Thank you so much for today. I've really enjoyed it, and I look forward to hosting you when you get to London.
I'm going to take you up on that.
Cool.
I would love to introduce you to Scott McCallum, who is retired inspector from CN Police, who is running the Canadian-Ukraine logistics plan.
Absolutely. That'd be perfect if you could. I'd be very grateful.
He is, what they have done, it started off with, I was cleaning out all of my police stuff in my garage and my closets, and some of this equipment was brand new. It's a shame. They won't take it back. What do I do with it? And that started this initiative to see cans, thousands and thousands of pounds of equipment and tourniquets, and they brought bunker gear over for a fire department that was in tears. It was like Christmas. These 4 guys, cops, who just decided that there's got to be a way, and they hooked up with the Ukrainian Center in London, Ontario, and have not stopped since.
Fantastic. Well, please,
I'll send you some stuff.
Please do. And any links that you've got for your business, send it over to me, and I will get it onto the main page.
Okay, I'll send you a link to my website.
Take care. God bless. Keep safe in all that cold weather.
You too, Paul.
Bye.
Have a good day.
Lovely
Thank you
talking.
for bringing me in.
No, my absolute pleasure. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.